as we jump in here, I am going to go ahead and resume the recording, just so you know. So the recording is started. Don't say anything mean, because we'll have you on record. But we will be sharing this recording after the fact, especially for those participants who were unable to join us live. We'll be sharing that afterwards as well. Or if attendees want to rewatch something that we talked about and they didn't quite catch it the first time. So happy to provide that as a follow-up to this event as well. Perfect. While you're popping in, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and throw in the chat where you are joining us from. Are you East Coast, West Coast, cross country, across the water? Where are you joining us? I would assume that many people are joining us from the DC area, but I would love to be proven wrong. Got Northern Virginia, ditto.
Really?
I had to get out. I couldn't take it anymore.
Are you in the middle of a bomb shelter somewhere?
No. That's in West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
Did I go away and come back?
You're back.
Yes, you did.
Okay, good. I was like, I went all of a sudden, I was talking and I went away and I was like, that's no fun. That's what I get. See, it's everybody in Zoom, right? All right, we've got just about a minute down there. For those people who are just joining us, I'm going to go ahead and start off by introducing myself. My name is Meg Kearns, and I am your quirky and caffeinated moderator for today. So I'm excited to kind of bring you the questions that we're going to be asking our panelists, but I'm very lucky that we have 5 stellar individuals here who really know their stuff and who are going to give us some really great information about the questions that we have going forward, because things seem to be changing. It may not feel like it all of the time, but it's definitely time for many of us. We're ready to move forward and see what's going to happen next, and being prepared for that is going to be the most important thing for us. So again, Meg Kearns, if you need anything during our conversation here, if you have questions, if you have things that you would like to know or have our panelists discuss, go ahead and throw that in the chat. I'm going to be keeping an eye on it on both sides. So making sure that while people are chatting and discussing, I'm keeping a tab on those questions. There will be a final Q&A at the end as well for anything that came up that did not potentially get answered. But during, please make sure that you're, giving us whatever questions that you may have, and we'll be sure to answer those as well. So since it is 1:30, I'm going to see if I can share this screen with you. See if you all can see that. Are you able to see that screen okay?
I am.
Let's hope so.
Yep.
Perfect. And which should be fun, as people are talking, you will actually be able to see their video pop up on the side so that you can actually see who is speaking to you while we are talking. So we will go ahead and get started there. I'm going to exit the full screen here so we can see everything. And let's get started here. It is 1:30. We are very cognizant of your time, and thank you so much for joining us here today. We promise to keep this to just about an hour so that we can make sure that we get you the most bang for that buck of your time. And we appreciate your attention and just want to welcome you and let you know kind of how you can participate here. We're going to let our speakers kind of introduce themselves. We're going to do the panel discussion, have some Q&A, and then we'll let you get on with your day. So tips for participation here: remove the distractions. Go ahead and silence the cell phone. If you have other browser windows open, if you can close those down, that's going to give you a more seamless transition through the things that we're sharing with you, just so that you don't accidentally have your Zoom shut down because of overuse. So make sure that those are closed down. And if you have headphones, it might be easier for you to hear and focus if you put those in. You should not, participants, be able to, or attendees be able to unmute yourself, but just in case that does happen, make sure that you keep your microphone on mute. We would love for you to be active in the chat, and please post those questions as they come up, as we said earlier. So we have these stellar expert panelists today that we are super lucky to have as part of this event. We wanted this event to be a little bit different for you, so less slides, more discussion. But we are going to introduce each of our panelists and let them have about a minute or so to tell you who they are and why it matters to you. So the first person we have is Jim Campbell. He is the president and CEO at Axon Fringe Solutions Group, Axon Global Strategies Group, and Be Well Inc. So Jim, I'm going to pop it over to you so that you can have the floor for a moment to just give a brief introduction.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Meg. So again, Jim Campbell. We work with brokers, contractors, advisors across the country in managing compliance and fringe benefits as it pertains to the requirements under wage terminations, and answer any questions around compliance that could pop up under SCA DBA contracting.
Perfect. We then have Katie Bilek, who is the co-founder of GovMates, the GovMates Consortium, and Senior Vice President at Republic Capital Access. She wears many hats as well. Katie, I'm going to go ahead and give you the chance for a second to go ahead and introduce yourself.
So hi everyone, Katie Bilek here. So Republic Capital Access, we are the largest specialty finance company for government contractors. So we are dedicated to the government contracting space. It is all that we do, so we know the industry very well. All of our clients do business with the federal government in some capacity, either as a prime or as a sub. The primary type of financing we provide is off balance sheet, so it is non-recourse. We don't require personal guarantees. There are no financial covenants at a relatively affordable rate. So for us as a financial institution, you'll never have to explain to us DCAA or FAR. We speak your language.
Perfect, thank you, and welcome, Katie. Next, we have Stephanie Alexander, who is the founder and CEO of Boost LLC, as well as the co-founder of GovMates and the GovMates Consortium as well. So Stephanie, I'm gonna pass it over to you so you can give a little bit about yourself as well.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. This picture is better caffeinated, actually dressed, you know, the full thing versus new quarantine style, which is a little more casual. So as Meg mentioned, I am the founder and CEO of Boost LLC. We work only with federal contractors, much like everybody else on this panel. So we speak FAR whether we want to or not. And the areas of service that we provide are accounting, contracts, HR, recruiting, and strategic pricing. So I have a kind of unique perspective we're a small business owners. We understand that aspect of it, cash flow, all the rest of it. The accounting side, compliance, plus the people side, the HR, the recruiting. There are some people who are still very much growing during this time. So I come at it from multiple personalities probably and multiple perspectives.
Fantastic, and thank you for being here as well. Next, we're going to pass it over to Leslie Stout-Tavigman, who is a shareholder at Jackson Lewis, specializing in employment law for management, which I know we have many questions, so we're very happy to have you here. Leslie, go ahead, you can have the floor.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So Jackson Lewis is a national law firm. We have about 61 locations across the country, and we represent exclusively management in all types of employment, labor, immigration, benefits, really anything that affects employers or employees is our specialty. We have a lot of, part of our practice is aimed at federal government contractors, however. So a large AAP, EEO practice. I am heading up and been very active, not only in our wage hour generally, but in our prevailing wages practice. So I spend a lot of my time, really most of my time, working with government contractor clients on not just basic wage and hour issues, but specifically compliance, enforcement, training, defense and DOL audits for Service Contract Act and Davis-Bacon as well.
Perfect, thank you. I know, Leslie, your microphone was just a little low there, so hopefully that will pop back up here as we continue chatting. So just so you know,
Okay.
in case we hear that does come in and out a little bit. And last but of course not least, we have Lee Stokes, who is the founder and CEO at the Compliance Services Agency. And Lee, we're going to go ahead and pass it over to you so you can have a moment to introduce yourself.
Great, thank you, Meg. First, I want to apologize. My video has been having some challenges this morning, so at some point this afternoon, it may come on at some point during the session. I personally have 12 years of both selling in the government contracting space on the wholesale side, and also I have a lot of experience creating administration platforms and products that are sold in the space. And currently today, I am the managing partner of 2 wholesale insurance firms and also one of the founders of the Contractors' Choice Voluntary Benefit Trust. Today, I think my role is primarily to talk about how voluntary benefits can be utilized and accessed in this space. And I'm excited to be part of this panel. I think there's an amazing opportunity right now to assist contractors and brokers alike as we kind of move through this interesting year we're all having in business.
You are completely right. I think interesting year is probably the nicest way I have heard it put yet. So on that vein, we're going to see if this will actually let me click out of here. Oh, I pulled up my, there we go. Reminders, as our panelists are discussing questions and topics, put your queries in that chat. I have it up so I can actually see that and take a look at it and make sure that we keep those going as we are discussing. So first question is, we're gonna start right in. What are your overall thoughts on Q4 this year regarding budgeting, the proposal bid sessions, and the general landscape? So basically, what is going on? And Jim, we're going to pass that one over to you first, and then we're probably going to pop it over to Stephanie next, just so everybody is ready. So Jim, what do you got for us?
Well, it's going to be really interesting. Obviously, as we're seeing budgeting for benefits, a lot of people prepare for 1/1, right, at January 1st effective dates. So as contractors are starting to wonder what's going to happen after all these government concessions and essentially the carrier concessions around COVID, how's that going to affect our rates? And it's really starting to put a buzz into folks to better budget and prepare. But that then cascades down to, what is our proposal strategy? Do we bid, no bid things that we were going to go after and not go after before? Did we receive some type of funding under COVID? So I think the general question is, what can we look forward to? And the data all kind of points to who's going to have the most budget dollars allotted to them. We see tech as a huge upswing. So it's not necessarily SCA DBA, but for those companies that are considered essential and SCA DBA, the budgets seem to be holding steady. What was funded will be funded again, especially in DoD and some of the larger agencies. But as it pertains to really how they're going to budget and things are going to go after, they're going to have to be very careful, because it's emphatically going to get hit in your fringe rate and how you build that up go forward. And that's going to have a cascade down to G&A and some other things.
Oh, I totally agree. So from what I'm hearing, and again, I think the answer is it depends on where you are, right? Who's your actual customer within the government? DoD is holding strong. The Intel community is still lower utilization right now than what they want to be. They're not all fully billing. I could expect that they will start to gradually, they'll come back first. But I've been told that not to expect any major RFPs in the Intel community this year. So I think things are getting pushed that way. I'm hearing from a proposal perspective. So those in the government space, we know that the summer is usually everybody's either on vacation, which isn't happening this year, or your head's down on a proposal. So those are your two areas, basically. That's what you do. And so some things are starting to we're starting to see some things get pushed out. We've seen RFPs drop and then have pushed out extensions on the due dates. So something that was 30 days is now 60 days. We've seen a couple of things just kind of like, not sure when that's actually going to come out. We had said it was 2Q calendar year 2Q versus government fiscal year 2Q. So we're seeing it kind of all over the place. I think the real question is, what does this do to your bid strategy? So if you are all essential people now, do you want to continue to go after essential work in the next 2 years? Are you going to be bidding government contractor sites, or are you going to be bidding client site? Are you going to have your people back in the office, and what are the costs associated with that? There's all the costs that you have already outlaid, because by now everybody's got a laptop, everybody's VPNing in. Where are you putting those? And so that all impacts your outward indirect rates. And now, I mean, the bid for now is for the next 5 years. So you've got to kind of somehow get that incorporated into your bid strategy for this summer.
There is definitely a lot to consider there. And it seems like when we ask these questions, a lot of them are answered with more questions, which is just the best way for us to kind of get to know the best way of going forward. But there are going to be a lot of questions that come from our questions. So that's a definite great way to get started there. So the second question then becomes, what is the current impact on indirect rates? We're going to talk about that specifically due to COVID-19.
Jim,
and I know we kind of want, yeah,
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Do you want to talk about fringe first? Because I mean, I have thoughts on overhead and G&A, right? So right now, if there's anything that you can put on the contract, put it on the freaking contract. Make that DL, direct, bill. But if you can't get it on the contract, so you're still paying for it. So we now have lease negotiations. We have, you're spending more time with your lawyer, which, sorry, Leslie, just costs more. Those lawyers keep billing. I don't know how, and so, I mean, you're just spending more time and energy. You have more people on the bench. You're spending more time on so all I see are factors that are increasing both your overhead for all the management around managing your team remotely, et cetera, and on your G&A. So all I see are rates going through the roof. Jim, thoughts?
Well, actually, I'd throw it to Katie real quick. I mean, are you seeing a request for funding help, even though people might have gotten PPE to get ready for maybe some bids that they want to go after around this? Have you seen an uptick?
I would say taking a different approach. We're seeing some of our clients view this as an opportunity to differentiate themselves from a financial capability perspective. So their thought process is that there might be a lot of small businesses, small government contractors who are actually affected during this crisis. So they are trying to demonstrate with their bids to the government that they are financially capable and that they have sufficient financing lined up in order to pursue a really, really large bid. So they're kind of banking on the thought that there might be some small businesses who might not be as financially sound as they are coming out of this.
So that's why I asked, because the financially strong, quote unquote, you're not going to see a lot of, small business or 8A companies probably be able to take that stance. Even though they have great capabilities and quals, they're still going to wait to be latched onto a prime. We're seeing that middle level player, the mid-tier company, really stand out right now because they have financial strength. They don't have to rely on just working with the mega primes. They've maybe got some prime contracts on their own. Their biggest question is, how are we going to finance it if we need to go after a large contract? How are we going to compete? Who can we talk to show that we are financially strong in case our fringe or indirect goes out of control? We really want to grow, but how can we grow to play on a larger scale? On the smaller side, we're seeing clients that are quite candidly stuck in a world of I can't grow anymore. I'm relying on the government funds under the PPE, under maybe a Main Street loan or something like that, just to stay alive. And they're getting paid. They're not getting, it's not really a slow pay situation. It's more of, I've added more cost internally, like, to Stephanie's point, with my attorney. Am I doing everything I possibly can to make sure my people are protected when they come back to work? So to Stephanie's point, I see rates going higher, but I see that middle tier contractor really looking for a way to go north, and they're trying to find a way to do it and not just glom onto overhead or add a ton of G&A.
We did have one question that did pop. Well, you might have kind of hit on this. I am going to ask it just to make sure that it gets answered. It says from Brianna, while indirects may be going up, are you seeing direct labor going down because of this? With unemployment going through the roof, the labor market, especially in IT services, is not nearly as tight as it has been in the past few years. What do we think this will do to salaries?
So I think that personally, I would like to see, this is horrible to say. I would like to see the labor market especially in the DC metro area, especially in the cleared space, especially in the very high end space, chill out, quite frankly, because we've had a lot of people who have demanded very high salaries, very high benefit packages, etc. So it was super hot. Does that mean that people who are highly desirable can't find a job? Absolutely not. It means right now, I see the labor market because we do recruiting, we're seeing people are very reluctant to change jobs. The devil you know, the devil you don't, right? So I don't want to change because I know what my current situation is. I don't want to take a risk and change to a new employer during this uncertainty. So I would rather stick it out, and then I will, come back around when I feel like we're in a better space. So the employment market is still, the salaries, I think they'll hold, DC metro market, I think they'll hold a little bit, maybe drop a little. We still have other factors, right? Like we have the Amazon influence, we have the other technology. Amazon's not going anywhere and they're not losing money right now. So, I mean, they still have a pretty big influence on this specific area. Outside of this geography, I think absolutely you will see labor rates go down. To what magnitude, I'm not sure. I don't think we know yet. So as every wave of unemployment number comes out, I think it's a wave of information and we haven't seen the bottom yet. So not uncertain.
And I think this is Leslie. I think it just depends too on, exactly what sector you're talking about. So we're seeing, and I'm sure you are, ones that are continuing to be extremely robust in the government contracting area, right? Anything essential services, anything where you've got folks that are embedded in government space and that government space is still up and running, anything that can, work remotely. On the salary side, what we're seeing in a lot of these sort of higher tiers is companies trying to hold on to their employees rather than, furlough or let them go by doing salary cuts, right? Now, salary cuts can go either like, oops, now you don't meet the exempt status for those folks. And, we can talk about that later. But a lot of them are meant to be temporary, right? So, depending on the business, and as we know, there's so many unknowns about when business is going to return to usual. But I think a lot of employers are hoping and letting their employees know, this 10% cut that you're taking, we are hoping to basically get you back at your salary level. But it is an unknown right now.
Real quick, Leslie, is there any legal implication that the contractor would have around that? Because they signed them at a current rate, at the DL rate, and then they had to make cuts. Now, I'm not talking just about the SCA group. I'm talking about the exempt group.
Right. Well, there could be. I mean, that's really going to depend on exactly how you bid your contract. Is it firm fixed price? Is it cost plus? I would certainly say that, and that's a great point. You may need to go back and look if you bid it at a price and the government was reimbursing you at a certain price. And in fact, you're, cutting wages. I think absolutely you need to go back and take a look very carefully at your contract to see what your obligations are there. Do you need to inform the government? Do you need to potentially, remit back to the government or bill differently because you're paying less? But, my experience is that really is going to depend on how you bid the contract.
Right, because that has a cascading effect down on overhead and fringe.
Yes.
Right? So your overall bid rate could be much lower and the government probably would pay you at that number as opposed to the higher number you want at, right? How long does this go on versus how long do they pay you for at that new rate? So.
Right. And then of course you've got, to your point, I mean, if you're talking Service Contract Act, obviously you cannot go below those certain rates.
Right.
So if you're non-exempt, you're really, you could lower them if you're paying well above, but you can't go any lower than that.
That's right. Yep.
And I think if you're on CPF, back to your choice of vehicles, if you're on a CPFF playing field, all you're doing is lowering your DL. So that actually shoots you in the foot, right? Like you're actually making your multiplier, you're becoming more expensive as you add on more indirect rate costs. To lower your DL just makes it, less to spread over. And so I think that's a problem that a lot of people are going to find as they move forward. So this goes back to the first question about what is your proposal strategy? What type of bids will you bid now? Would you you know, CPFF, you're at least getting you probably are going back to the government potentially with a rate increase, but it might be covered if they have the budget. Is that the type of world that you want to live in for the next 5 years? Or firm fixed price, you could have really taken a huge hit this year because you couldn't control your rates.
Very, very true. And I am going to move us to the next question just so that we keep going because I know we could spend a lot of time on these and we are going to come back to some of these themes. So not to worry. The next question we have are, how are health and welfare rates changing as we move forward right now?
Well, every July, usually the Department of Labor comes out and makes an AMA around what the health and welfare will be. Currently, we have two, a high and a low fringe. The low fringe, making sure that you include paid sick leave. Right now, based on information released from Bloomberg and Deltec, it does not look like there will be a significant increase to rates, essentially health and welfare, because of the impact, I think, of the financial impact to the government. Now, could it go up still? Sure. 5 years ago, we saw it stay flat at 427. The next year, it was renewed at 427. If I go back categorically from 2008, it had gone up every single year before that 427 hold, and then the split to a high and low fringe with PSL. I would not project that the rates will go much higher. We've seen a pretty big increase year over year the last 8 years in a row. This year, I don't think the rates will go much higher. The cost of benefits will sure go higher. Lee can attest to what he's seeing across the country. The rates will go higher because the carriers are all moving a lot of COVID testing, whether it's current are you sick testing or antibody testing. Some of them are thinking about rolling into their plans. And that's going to have a significant cost, especially if there's any vaccine that's approved. That's going to ramp the cost of the benefits that if you don't price your health and welfare benefit strategy to that rate, you could outrun it and it could be significant. And that's all then overhead to either the employee as a payroll deduction or the employer trying to cover the cost and keep employees.
Hey, Jim, this is Lee. I would echo what you said. For the first year in the last 5, I've seen actual voluntary benefits blocks actually increasing in rates where they've held steady consistently. And, you know, whether it's true or they're anticipating, you know, future expenses, that we're seeing entire blocks being re-rated and moving, you know, north of where they were over the last 5 years, you know, for the first time, you know, in quite some time. And most of it's, you know, they're pointing to COVID-related claims and what they think the economy is going to be doing, you know, in the next several years as it relates to their investments as insurance companies. We tend to forget a lot of these companies are in the money business, not the insurance business.
And that's actually one of the markers I use. So everybody knows when I look at health and welfare plans and we build benefits, I actually look at the carrier's investments. If their carrier investments are heavily in RX, you know what's going to go up emphatically. With the health and welfare rates not commensurately moving north, there's going to be a shortage of money to pay for those benefits.
So one thing I would bring up is on for folks that are listening in who have Davis-Bacon rather than Service Contract Act, those fringe rates are set very differently and they're based on job classification, not a new national one. And any ones that come from union-dominated job classifications are generally set by CBAs. We'll have to see, right, where unions are going to be scrambling as well with their employers, trying to kind of keep the benefits, and employers are going to try to press it down. But unlike Service Contract Act with Davis-Bacon, all you need to do is meet that prevailing wage rate. So if you're an employer and your benefits are going up and your costs are going up, you can take more of a credit. And if you want to, lower that hourly rate when you're on construction contracts. You can't do that for SCA, but you can do it for Davis-Bacon. So those of you in construction, you know, at least you can kind of have that arrow in the quiver in terms of how are we going to handle this.
That's a huge point. As I think about it here, when you say you can take credit for it, construction dollars, some of the big construction contracts that were just let recently that, you know, so that people are fulfilling, they were in the billions, some base realignment things and base structural things. That's a lot of bodies going back to work. if anybody on the phone works in construction or you advise construction companies, that's something that you should really consider talking to them about, because they might be able to take advantage of their prevailing wage rates. When the rates from the carriers are going up, this is a way for them to offset their cost and not change their rate structure or lose money. It's a massive thing to consider. You can't do that under SCA, but Davis-Bacon gives you a lot of leeway there.
And that does kind of take us into our next piece, because we are talking a lot about the people. So what steps do we need to take to get people back to work? And that doesn't mean, kicking them out of their homes and sending them back to the site, but both on-site and remote for those who need to do both ways. And what is the responsibility as an employer? I know this one has a lot more questions than answers right now, but would love to kind of hear what you all are thinking and seeing as the trends move forward.
Go
ahead.
Yeah, I'm happy to lead this off. I mean, it's multi-layered. It's going to depend, I would say, first, where are you located as an employer, where are your employees located? Because of course, almost every state, some are being lifted, but most states have had some, grouping of mandatory stay-at-home orders or safer-at-home orders, or non-essential business closure and restriction orders. So that's really the first place. I'm in Virginia, and we're just finding out, even though the governor in our state has a phased rolling out to open up businesses, Northern Virginia, where I'm located, they're raising their hands saying, no. Arlington, Fairfax County, we are not ready. Infection rates are still high. So that is really going to be the first thing. And that's not remote, but that's for your on-site. And, second is going to be, and all of those reopening orders are going to list what the new restrictions are. So employers, at least to get people back on site, are going to have to look really closely at both, state orders, local health department orders. OSHA is, always changing in turn, no matter where you are, about sort of what's the newest requirement to keep your employees safe, as well as guidance from the CDC. There are some new things that the EEOC is now allowing employers to do. Just a couple of weeks ago, maybe a week ago or so, the EEOC came out with guidelines that says, if you're an employer, you can basically require a COVID test of an employee before they return to work, right? So that's new. They have not addressed antibody testing, and everybody who's been reading the news, apparently we're all waiting for that, but so far not a great test. You do need to be careful, in terms of workers who have concerns about safety, who may be under the Americans with Disabilities Act, request some type of accommodation. They may be in a high risk group. They've identified themselves as having, it seems to change every day, but some underlying factor that could make them more susceptible. So employers need to really be looking at that as well, in terms of, are you getting people back to work safely? So those are some of the, responsibilities an employer, in terms of all the different things that you have to be looking at and thinking about, certainly before you start bringing folks back on site. We have folks that we're talking to, Stephanie, you probably are too, that are, looking now, like, can we reconfigure our space? Does it work to keep people with masks or at least 6 feet away? What about shared copying machines? Do we leave wipes there? So there's a lot to consider about, how can you make the workplace safe? And of course, following any mandated guidelines.
So I think there's a whole new cottage industry that has just started about the safety around your particular workspace, right? Like all the things we've never thought about, like, the 6 feet, and, the days of the Uber cubes are long gone, I think. I think where I see a lot of things is everyone's waiting on local guidance, as you said, Leslie, but also, what is your client saying? If you're, what's your agency saying? Are the government employees going back to work? Because you're not until they are, right? Unless you're essential. And I think a lot of people are taking a longer view on this. If you have already proven that your employees can do the work remotely, as a kind of risk mitigation strategy, you're going to have them continue to telework and work remotely as long as probably you can. You have to start asking yourself as an employer, as you talk to, like, what is your responsibility? Like, why do they need to be in the office? Do they really need to be in the office? Do they really just need to get away from their kids? Because that's a whole different strategy. But I mean, do they really need to be in the office to do their jobs? And I think employers have to ask them, they have to do a little soul searching here. And now, much to the chagrin of, you know, commercial realty people everywhere, now's when you, I mean, like, do you need the office? Do you need a big office? I think there's a lot of people asking those questions. If you've proven it over the past couple of months, what's to say we're not going to be, I mean, we're going to be in our houses at least in the summer, if not the fall, unless you're essential.
Well, I think the one thing to consider is, obviously we represent a lot of people that are deemed essential, right? Security guards and DHS and,
Right.
and things like that. They don't have a choice. They've been handling this since day one. A lot of employers are saying, hey, we took on extra costs to provide PPE to the security guards or these folks watching over nuclear facilities. They don't have a choice not to go work, right? They can't remote in.
Right.
So it's been a massive undertaking for them to get their contracting officers to come out and say, go ahead and file for the reimbursement. We understand your G&A just went up a ton. Go ahead and send in the bill. As an employer and their responsibility, I think that the SCA DBA market will be the first one to bounce back quickly in this regard, because they never had a choice, right? They had to absorb the cost up front. They had to put people back to work. The one thing is understanding under FFCRA, what's your requirement if somebody did get sick at work or they have a family member at home and they are essential? There are a lot of legal questions that are going to be asked from this. There's going to probably be a lot of lawsuits in those, return to work or mandatory work type places, because people don't want to be forced to go back to work in an unsafe environment. So employers are going to have to ask themselves, what's the maximum I can do to make my facility, my post, my whatever, as safe as possible?
And I think you have to ask yourself that you have an
That
obligation
actually takes us well into
without regard to cost right this second. Like right now, it's kind of act first, think later, or reimburse later, unfortunately, which is also at a time when cash flow is tight. But yeah, if you've got to get people in there, you have an obligation to do your darndest from that perspective.
Definitely true. We're actually going to this one back over to Leslie as well, since we kind of went into it a little bit. What do we expect from the Department of Labor regarding enforcement activity? Do we have anything that's coming forward already, or are we still in a wait and see?
Lots of it. Some of the folks listening and some of the panelists, there's still a lot of activity going on from the Department of Labor, and I think, always targeted at government contractors. They are always very inspired to follow the federal funds and make sure that there is compliance. Those have been tricky because they're the ones I've been experiencing. The DOL investigators aren't allowed to go on site, and they're asking a lot of prime contractors. Things normally they would say, like, no, we'll go find your lower tier sub. We're now being asked, you go chase the documents and provide it and give us employees' home phone numbers and such so we can interview them. They've added additional, Wage Hour has been hiring. They have added additional investigators. I think knowing that because of how quickly employers generally, and certainly in the government contract space, have had to scurry to try to figure out how do we keep, delivering the services and, not run out of funds. So they're really on the lookout for, have you skimped on paying your prevailing wages, under SCA or Davis-Bacon? Are you still recording all hours? Because, gee, the work has to get done, but maybe you're not, really getting all the money you should, and your benefits costs have gone up and you're looking to save. So are you correctly recording hours, even though you may be, it looks okay on paper, how you've been paying folks? One of the things that I know there are already enforcing and are going to continue to step up is an area that they've had for a while, which is the federal paid sick leave requirement, coming more now into play because more people are trying to use paid sick leave, right? And so there's a lot of enforcement activity now and that we expect in the future on that. The new laws, Jim referenced, I think, under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, there's new paid sick leave, there is expanded partially paid Family Medical Act leave. That's all being enforced by the Department of Labor Wage Hour Division. And so we think that, you know, if they're doing an SCA or a Davis-Bacon or an FLSA audit, they're also going to be taking a look at that. Do people ask for leave? Did you appropriately give leave, you know, or not for that? Another area is, I mentioned earlier, and certainly we've counseled clients about, you know, if they've had to reduce hours for folks, especially exempt. Some of them have perhaps just cut salaries. Some of them have made those exempt folks into hourly employees, but now when they're going more fully back to work, you know, are they handling that appropriately, you know, flipping from exempt to non-exempt? And we think the DOL is going to look closely at that. We know an issue always comes up too, under the FLSA for your exempt employees, there's very tight laws on making deductions. So we often hear scenarios about, I had an exempt worker and they worked Monday and Tuesday, and then the government shut the site down the last 3 days. Do we have to pay them for the full work week? And the answer generally is like, you do. You know, if the employee was ready, willing, and able to work, and they worked any part of a work week, you're responsible for paying them for the whole week, absent just a few exceptions. So that's something that we've heard the DOL is going to be looking closely at as well. And I'd say maybe last, with non-exempt employees, anyone who now is working remotely, but the employer really hadn't set up, you know, prior to this working remotely, we're looking at, have you properly captured all time, you know, worked, which is often different what the DOL thinks is work time than an employer might think. And you may have employees who are, oh, they're doing like their full 8 hours of work, but now they're at home. I've worked for an hour, I took a break to play with the kitten, you know, I did this, I get back. Well, under the FLSA, there's a concept of the continuous workday, which says unless you've got, you know, really scheduled breaks, when you pick up and put down work, you know, we're concerned like maybe that person really was working like 12 hours, you know, with these short breaks in between. So that's another thing that we fully expect the Department of Labor to focus on. And then posting requirements, right? So SCA, Davis-Bacon, FLSA, if now your employees have moved off the site and remote, did you keep your posters up? That obligation is still there. Did you move them into, you know, an intranet space or communicate them otherwise to employees who are no longer, you know, working at the work site? And last, and I know others will talk about, Jim in particular, perhaps, the benefits, right? So, you know, did you furlough an SCA worker? Did you pay them out their vacation then, or should you have kept it rolling over on the books? Did you keep them on the medical plan? You know, what happened besides looking at your own plan? So we think that's another area that the DOL is going to be really looking at closely in enforcement activity.
And how you used your PPP funds to pay for those benefits. That's going to be a huge, somebody asked that question on the chat, but I don't know. I mean, and again, this is just me asking from a financial standpoint. Katie, are you seeing anything from folks that are taking PPP funds and how it affects the loans that you've provided?
Yeah, so specifically at Republic, we're not administering the PPP loans, but we've been very involved in the process, given that a lot of our clients and friends in the industry have applied for them. But I would say in general, we believe there's really going to be a shift, and frankly, there already has been a shift in focusing of deployment of funds to now auditing of those who took the loans, as well as the actual forgiveness process. We're actually still awaiting guidance from the SBA. I just checked my inbox and I still don't see the guidance yet. But by May 14th, allegedly, to kind of help further shape business owners' decisions to return PPP loans if they feel like they can't meet the criteria to keep those. Yeah, right now I would say it's, you know, some folks have taken those loans, and justifiably so, and others have chosen to return them just because they decided from their own personal situation that they wouldn't need to use those as a business.
They were getting paid on time. They weren't seeing any interruption in business flow.
Yeah, some folks simply just didn't see, they weren't economically affected in the line of work that they did.
Yeah, so that probably wouldn't trigger much from the Department of Labor, but from a benefit standpoint, if you take PPP, you use them towards benefits. What I've understood, and Leslie, you could maybe check me if I'm wrong here, they will be audited, how those PPP went to pay, and then you got reimbursed for those same employees from the contract. So you will have to justify that you kind of took money from PPP to pay for benefits, and then you later got reimbursed for that same time period of work for those same employees. So there could be an impact if you took PPP and you ended up getting the money paid back from your contract. So it's
Yeah, there could be. I'm not sure yet how much the DOL is going to be engaged in that piece of
Right.
activity, but for sure, I think there's going to be, safe to say, a lot of scrutiny and audits coming from SBA, IRS even, and government audit agencies in terms of, were those funds properly used.
Yeah, I meant DOL referring it to IRS, right? If it's an SBA or
Yeah.
DBA contractor, they would just refer it to IRS. So
There's a lot there that I think we're going to have to keep our eyes on, especially with the SBA stuff that's not quite out yet, but hopefully that does come through this week so that we have a little bit more, guidance there and some ideas of what's going to happen. Going forward here, how are companies handling the issuing or replacing of PPE for those individuals who are required to be on site? And should there be a concession sought from the contracting officer for those cost adjustments?
well, seeing that we have a lot of clients that have to do this, they have to provide face shields, gloves, and they incurred a lot of cost. There was guidance that actually was released by, and I took notes. There were 5 agencies that released approval and memos for approval of reimbursement for PPE provided to employees. So DoD, Commerce, Justice, they all have released a memo stating that they will allow for submission of cost adjustment for the provision of PPE for essential staff. Now, one of the things I think is most necessary is we have a lot of folks that work in security, especially down on the border, right? And they've had to absorb PPE costs for a long time. They've got different types of things. But when it came to COVID, those costs ramped, right? Because you have border agents by the thousands that didn't have protective masks. They might have had gloves, but not masks. So we've seen the dollars that have been contributed to PPE go way up, and they've been allowed to get reimbursed for that. But if they think that they are taking on a cost because of COVID, I would definitely ask your contracting officer if you can be reimbursed for those costs.
Absolutely.
That was a big one that people tend to ask about a lot, especially. Next one would be, what should a contractor do if the SCA employees are mandated to work or deemed essential, but the employee doesn't want to work or possibly be subjected to COVID? And what are the requirements for COVID or antibody testing going forward? Do we have guidance on that quite yet?
I'll let Leslie answer. I've actually called her about the legalities of this, so I'm going to let the attorney say it because I have stayed away from FMLA and FFCRA as much as possible.
And it might be an answer of call your lawyer, and that's totally okay. But it's just, if we have guidance on that, it would be to kind of share that with everybody.
Right. Well, it is, sort of at a high level, because this is the kind of thing where it could be, again, very fact specific on the particular employee and, the workplace condition itself. But, if someone, and this is generally, could be any worker, if you're open for work and the person's job exists and you're saying, the work is there and they are, and, in accordance with all of the local and state mandates, the person can work at the site, right? So we have to have all of that. But they don't want to work, or they're worried because they heard something about someone being subjected to COVID. General guidance is, we talked a little bit about things that, employers are required to do or should do to keep their workers safe and their workplace safe. So, you would assure your workers that in fact you're doing it, right? So you need to let them know these are the rules that we're following from the CDC and the health agencies. You would look for, is the employee just generally, worried about COVID and doesn't want to be in the workplace? You would look for, is that reasonable in some way? Have they, and I mentioned before, have they identified, and this is under the Americans with Disabilities Act, have they identified perhaps that they are particularly susceptible to want to be one of those people who could get, very ill or higher death rate, right? Because of their age, because of underlying, lung disease or diabetes or any number of things that are actually kind of posted on the CDC. So it's something employers can kind of cross-check for themselves. And that is going to really help guide you then in terms of, is it reasonable? Like, do you need to give this person some kind of leave, right? Because they have sort of been able to state to you, I'm unsafe, here's why, or I'm particularly susceptible and I need this kind of accommodation. Or do you as the employer have the right to say, we have taken every step, we understand you're concerned, we've tried to address your concerns, but this job needs to happen. And if you, can't or won't perform the job, then you may need to be replaced. So, obviously that's kind of high stakes, and you wouldn't want then a claim from the employer that, you had an OSHA violation, or, someone tested positive right next to you and you were making them, sit in the same place without, a deep clean disinfection. So you have to be really careful about it. But in the end, those are the choices you're going to need to make. And I would say, again, be scrupulous that you are following, any requirements and any guidance, so that you are identifying and addressing, safety in the workplace, in addition to anything that might make a particular workspace or a particular employee especially susceptible if they were to become ill. There, this then also gets into leave issues that Jim mentioned and I talked about. Even with the new federal leave and sick leave, though, there are very specific criteria, and it's not, I'm just afraid to go to work, right? You can't get paid sick leave or even FMLA leave for something like that. It really has to be tied to, a quarantine and isolation order. You're caring for someone who's sick, you have symptoms yourself and you're seeking medical care, you tested positive. So it's not a free-for-all for employees, but as employers, again, you want to be very careful in making those decisions.
Sounds like a very fine line, no matter which way that you fall. No matter which side of the line you fall, it sounds like it's very fine either way.
One of the things I'll note is that the carriers on the healthcare side are providing reimbursements, co-pays, whatever have you, for COVID testing. There is no antibody test as of yet that's been approved. A lot of companies are taking this opportunity to use their benefits to get COVID testing done on site. And there's a number of companies, Lee might be able to attest to this a little bit more. There are a number of companies that have gotten into this space to do COVID testing on site. I know he's big into the telemedicine space, and some of the things that have been addressed there for employees across the country to really address this problem.
Yeah, just real quickly. So the largest provider in that space, MD Live, hasn't put out their guidelines, but they are, their providers as of 2 weeks ago were not allowed to actually write a script for a test. And there was just a small legality that needed to be overcome, but they expect, I think, sometime this week to announce that MD Live will be able to do that. There are other telemedicine providers who have already overcome that and are prescribing those tests. So,
and what that means is you don't have to necessarily incur a cost with your healthcare provider. You can go on telemedicine, not go anywhere near an office and say, do I need to get tested? So there's a lot of things an employer can do to preempt an employee to make the right decision before they even go back to a workplace.
Perfect. So we have some things that we have to look forward to. And on that note, I know we kind of already talked about this one, so we're going to go ahead and combine 8 and 9 here. Hopefully it'll pop up there. So regarding benefit planning going forward, because we said we want to look forward to the future, what's coming up next. What are some key points to showcase when planning and building new plans, along with the pay and benefit issues that should be taken into account when ensuring compliance?
Well, I think first and foremost, you have to understand your client. You have to understand what type of work they're doing. Are they an IT contractor and they can work remote? To Stephanie's point, they have VPN and computer at home. or are they SCA DBA and they're working on site every day? And some of them have restrictions under the health and welfare rates. So you have to first know your client. The design, the costs are going to go up. Do you know how to properly plan for those costs? A lot of folks just say, well, we're self-funding is the biggest name in benefits now. We'll just self-fund all of our clients. Under certain contracts, you can't. SCA and DBA, the DOL has to approve the trust and your plan before you do that. And a lot of companies have foregone getting that approval by the DOL. You're running a huge risk. If you're keeping that money in CapEx or OpEx, that should be health and welfare rated, then you're going to get into trouble and there's going to be a problem. So you really need to understand your client first and foremost. You have to understand your contract requirements. Are you under a CBA? Does the CBA mandate certain things? There's a lot of things to take in consideration when benefit planning in general, but as we're coming up for post-COVID, take that and ramp it up by about 10 questions, because you have to make sure that your carrier is providing testing. What's the cost structure for those testing? What's it going to do to your rate structure? All of those types of things. And Stephanie, I don't know if you've ever thought about any of it with any of your HR clients, but
we think about it all the time, because all I can tell you is everything's going to be more expensive, and that just seems to be the way. No, but I want to ask you a loaded question on this that we will document just for, grins. Any guess, and I know it's totally a guess and it's too early and blah, blah, blah. Don't give me lawyer talk. Sorry, Leslie. But don't give me it depends. Any idea on what people should potentially be putting in as an escalation factor for benefits for next year? If I'm doing my budgeting and I'm doing forward pricing and I'm looking at proposals, what would be best practice, or what would be something that you feel like is not crazy?
15%. And the only reason I come up with that number is Kaiser has released a study that estimated cost trend goes out the window for most carriers. Even if they said their trend and their expected cost was 6% or 5% or whatever it was, that goes out of the window because COVID hit like a tidal wave, right? So, and then it precipitates all the comorbidities down that people may have. So if they have diabetes or any of these other conditions, those costs have ramped because conditional interaction has ramped. They've gone to the doctor's office more. They've needed more prescriptions. They've needed XYZ more. So, or more critical care. So I would say 15% on a benefits platform, at least.
At least.
And Jim, 15 to 18% is the range that I've seen in all the studies over the past, 6 weeks. Yeah, so you're right on target there.
I'm sensing a lot of note taking. That's good.
Yeah, everybody hear that? Put that in your budget.
Everybody write it down, put it down. But that actually gets us into the finance and budgeting portion, which is going to help us wrap up our time together here today. So I'm actually going to pop this one over to Katie, which is on financing. Many companies have participated in those COVID-related government loan programs. So what can they expect going forward, even though we don't have that SBA knowledge? And is there anything else there that we haven't already said that deems to be said here?
Sure. So I think going forward, there will be a heightened level of scrutiny on those who participated in the government loan program. So I would just say, be prepared to document your rationale and information that was available at the time of application. If your loan amount was over $2 million, you will absolutely expect to be audited, quote, Secretary of Treasury. As far as what to actually document, your application process. So that includes the underlying information and guidance that actually shaped your decision to apply. Things like economic data, forecast for your company as well as your industry, public health information. That may seem unnecessary at this time, but you need to actually preserve that data that existed at that point in time to actually demonstrate your true intent when you applied for the loan. The environment in the coming months, or even years when an audit could actually occur, is going to be very different and probably a lot less forgiving than the one that we're living in now. So find a way to actually isolate the environment in which we're living in today from a documentation perspective. It also goes without saying, document the use of funds, where it's used for payroll, for other expenses like utilities, rent, mortgage interest, or again, no more than 25% of the loan amount. And I'll even defer to some of my friends here on the panel who are experts on this. Some of our folks have been setting up specific charge codes for labor in anticipation of requesting forgiveness of the loan. But document, document, document. That's the most important thing, and being able to essentially capture your intent at the point and time where you actually applied for the loan. Another thing is communicating with your existing lender or financing institution. Obviously, you probably, if you took PPP funds or you went through the Main Street Lending Program, you probably went through them. And so make sure that they're kept abreast of your status and your goals going forward. Should you choose to term out the PPP funds, they're going to want to know your cash flow position. They're going to want to know what your new debt schedule looks like, especially if they have an existing debt, say a line of credit or a term loan in place. They want to know what other pieces of capital are adjacent to them in the cap structure. So obviously, communication has always been important with your banker, with your financing institution, but it's important more than ever now.
Perfect. That's what we need to know. So make sure you document all of the things. But that takes us back to more of that budgeting and talking budget. So what are we seeing in regards to more of those rap rates? I know we talked a little bit about it in the beginning, but it does bear repeating here. The overhead costs due to COVID. We talked a lot about the PPP already, so we don't have to hit on that one. But what are we seeing when it comes to that budgeting stuff?
It's only going up, baby.
I was like, I know Stephanie's got ideas.
On the benefits, I hear, all I hear is cost. All I hear is cost. So let's hope austerity in the times of deficits and all of that talk is put on pause for at least a couple of years, because right now, I don't see how your multiplier doesn't go up in 2021. I just don't. Unless you're putting a ton into unallowable and you were cash flow rich going into this, and good on you if you were. It's also, it could be a strategy, right? Jim, you talked about the mid tiers. That's a really good point. Like, now's the time. And Katie even mentioned, your financial stability has become a strategic, advantage in some ways. So you write to it, you get a financial commitment letter. You put it in your proposal, you talk to how you're going to keep your wrap rate under control while recognizing the huge increase on your health insurance. You talk about how you're going to keep your retention rates high, regardless of, the fact that you're going to have to reduce your 401k allocation or something like that. Those are the strategies that I see most govcons doing.
I think you guys will remember a couple years ago, like being in that 300 million range or 100 million range was kind of like waiting to be sold, right? You were waiting to be bought by somebody. And now it's like they're the catalyst to lead the charge, in my mind, or what even some economists are saying. But when I look at the wrap rates for smaller companies and how they're going to move north, I see a lot of JVs potentially happening, right? Where they can offload a lot of overhead to a larger player, but still share in the work, as opposed to that mandated small business set aside type thing. I think there's going to be a lot more JVs to offset cost. I think Katie's going to receive a lot more phone calls to get like the financial viability letters and those types of things, because I think just again that larger small player, that mid-sized player is going to really be able to take advantage of some of these large awards that are coming out and really move north and help bring along some smaller companies without saying, hey, you're just an 8A that needs to fill the slot. They're going to say you have technical capabilities we really need, and we can help offset some of your back end cost. So, but I agree. I think your wrap rate's going to go up. I think there's no other way around it.
So things are changing, but there is opportunity. That's what I'm hearing, right? That's what we're leaving this with.
There absolutely is. If you play it the right way and really go to the key strategies that we've talked about. One thing that we do not have time for on this webinar, but is another whole discussion, is the impact on M&A. That was so sizzling hot, right? So now, maybe as we talk about strategies and moving forward, maybe now's the time to start thinking about, hey, do I want to get out of this and it's a fire sale? Or on the opportunity side, is there somebody I'm looking to buy? JVs are another really good strategy for proposals and kind of looking at your strategic plan for the next couple of years. I think it's a great point.
Very much so. And that, like you said, could be an entirely different webinar. So keep an eye out for that one. keep an eye out. I think something might be coming. We have had several people who have put in, questions and gotten some answers. Thank you, Jim, for kind of typing those up. And a lot of those were answered, kind of within our discussion here. If you do have other questions that you need to have answers, you can let us know. We'll stay on for another, minute or so. I know a lot of people, have things that they jumped in on and had to jump back off. So we wanted to definitely thank you. But as we're kind of pulling those things together, we do want to thank you for joining us today. And I would love to thank our panelists for being here and spending their time with us today. I know there's a lot going on, and it really, it's very important that we were here today, and we really thank you for spending your time with us. So those people who were on the recording, thank you so much. If you need to see it again, if you just liked us so much, you want to see it one more time, you'll get that recording in your email, as well as for those who did not have a chance to attend. I will open the floor again one last time if anybody else has anything that they wanted to share, just to kind of wrap things up. So anybody who wants to pop in now, here's your chance. Any of our panelists who want to say anything else that I did not get to?
Well, I just wanted to thank everybody for joining. First and foremost, Katie, Stephanie, Leslie, and Lee, Meg, you leading. But thank you guys for joining. Obviously, I trust you in the space, and you guys talk to everybody. So we're going to see a lot of these instances. But can't say enough about GovMates and what you guys have done for the market, and hopefully that activity picks up. So just really appreciate you contributing, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for having us.
And we'll make sure in that follow-up email that you do get the links to connect with everybody on LinkedIn who is a panelist today, in case you have other questions, as well as their contact information should you want to discuss things further with some of the spaces that they're individually in. I do not think that we see any other questions right now, so we will officially wrap it up. Thank you all for being here today and participating, and we wish you the best of luck going forward. And let us know if you have any questions on any of these fronts. So thank you all very, very much, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.